Hi, this is Jill from Fabric Garden, and today I want to talk about the month 3 block. Make sure it really is month 3. Yes, it is month 3 block for Hey Violet block of the month. So this month we are making 10 of the same blocks, and this is our block. Very pretty. So this block is really just made up of 2 different units. So we have in each of the 4 corners, we have some sort of, often call this a cat's cradle block. I've heard it called a combination unit, many names for it, but it is basically a half square triangle where half the block is one fabric and the other half is 3 pieces, a square and 2 triangles. Then we also have Hourglass, which is 4 quarter square triangles, and then the middle is just a square. So we really just have 2-pieced units that we are constructing for this month. So let me start with the Hourglass because it is the easiest of the units. Now, there's many ways to construct an Hourglass, and in this month we're using an interesting method. So first we're making half square triangles, and caution here, you've really got to pay attention to the fabrics. It's all labeled on your pattern, the cutting, but I don't know, I keep having to, is this the blue, is this the purple? I'm really having to be careful with color placement because for some reason I'm having a little trouble with my color placement. So, really follow the pictures for your color placement. So you start out and you're making different half square triangles. So I think I have I have 3 different ones. So I'm making more of this one, and then I'm making less of this one and of this one. So these go together, and let me look at the picture. So it is having me take one of these dark ones and one of these light ones. So I've made these half square triangles. I have not trimmed them or anything, just following directions. And then I nest them together, and I want to make sure that the 2 fabrics that are the same are opposite each other. So I nest the seams together, and I have drawn, I don't know if you can see that. I didn't draw very dark, but I have drawn, you can either draw 1 line or you can use your magic wand and draw 2 lines, but you are going to be sewing 2 lines, a quarter, half an inch. There we go, you can see it better here. So I've drawn a 1/4 inch on either side of the line. And so now you can see when I cut these apart, I will have my Hourglass. So each one will make 2 of the identical Hourglass. So we are making half square triangles, putting those together, marking perpendicular to the original seams, sewing more seams to get our Hourglass blocks. And this is actually, quite a nice method to make Hourglass if you've got a pretty easy combination of colors. Sometimes if you've got a bunch of different ones, it's just easier to cut quarter square triangles and sew them together. So we're making these, and once you make them, these are getting trimmed to 4 inches. Is that what it says? Trim each to 4 inches. You know what? Don't trim them at this point. The pattern tells you to trim them to 4 inches. Don't trim them. just use them the size they are, because we are going to trim at the hourglass stage. So once we have our hourglasses, then we are going to trim them to 3.5. Sorry about the misunderstanding there. So let me repeat it since I kind of messed it up. You're making your half square triangles. The pattern tells you to trim this to 4 inches. No need to do any trimming, because we might as well just do one trimming at the hourglass stage versus trimming and then trimming. So you will have made these and they get trimmed to 3.5. So trimming an hourglass block can be tricky because you have 2 seams, and they need to meet in the center of the block. So if you're using a regular square ruler, you have to figure out what is the center. So if these are 3.5 divided by 2, the center is 1 3/4. So you would need to be having your 3.5 with a 1 3/4 inch spot on the ruler at the center. And that, for me, that is complicated. So I usually pull out, this is my Tucker trimmer. Let me find a piece of fabric that you can see this on. If you came to my sewing room, you would see I love my tools, but they make it easier and more accurate for me. So this is a Studio 180 design Tucker trimmer, and you can see that it has a bias through it, and then it has other lines through it. So what's really cool is, so one side is for whole inches, the other side is for half inches. So on this, and I might be backwards, I don't know, I find the 3.5 and I line up one seam of the hourglass on the bias, and then I line the other seam of the hourglass on the 3.5 inch line. So I have a line to line up both seams. I trim 2 sides, flip the block around, and do the exact same thing. And I just get these beautiful, perfect squares. You can, as I say, you can use your regular square ruler with markings. You just may want to use some sort of colored tape or a Post-it note to mark that 1 3/4 inch spot, because that will have to line up with the center of your block because the critical part on these blocks is that these seams come out to the point of the block. You want that right centered in the middle there. That is what will give you beautiful points with your hourglass. So it's important that this be centered and your seams come out here. So take some time. If you're using a regular ruler, really take some time, figure out where that center point is before you start cutting away. If you have a Tucker trimmer, it's all done for you. Okay, so that is hourglass. And let me put all my pieces aside so I'm not mixed up in. And last time I talked a little bit about this cat's cradle block. So the pattern has you, let me pull this out. It has you cutting a large triangle, 2 small triangles in a square, and sewing them together. And you can absolutely make the block this way. It is pretty standard writing, but last time I showed you how I like to use my Creative Grids Cat's Cradle ruler. And with that ruler, I am cutting 2, and it's printed right on the ruler what you need to cut for each piece. 2 rectangles, and those rectangles become these small triangles. And you cut 2 squares, and the squares become this square out here. This is a technique where you're making 2 of these blocks at the same time. That's why we've got 2. And then we have a large rectangle, and that large rectangle becomes this bottom larger triangle. So the rectangle and the square get sewn together, and then they get flipped opposite, right sides together and sewn together, so that you have this piece here. Now, what's really cool, let me see, we've got this time while we're sewing, we have these two cat's cradle blocks, which are mirror images of each other. So the small triangles are mirror image, one up in one corner and one in the other. And when you are making, oh, it's on my lap. When you're making your piece, you just use the two different colored triangles, same color square, two different colored rectangles, and when you follow the directions, you will automatically get your mirror images. So very cool. I wasn't sure it would work. I used some scrap fabric first, and because I thought, oh, am I gonna have to make extra? But no, it worked out just perfectly. So in this technique, then once you have this piece, the ruler has the sizes that you need to cut. And of course, it comes with directions and a video on how to sew it together. And then it has a little spot on the ruler down here on this end that says mark sewing line. And I used that to mark these lines on the back of my piece. And when I put the piece right sides together, with my large rectangle, so I have my large rectangle and this piece, I sew on both of those lines. And the ruler has a side for cutting the two pieces apart, but really any ruler can do that. And then the ruler has all the markings for squaring it up, and it will tell you right on the ruler. I love this ruler, has such good directions. Here's the square in your block, and it tells you, oops, I'm upside down. So here's all the different sizes that it will make. So these are all the different sizes of the square that you could have here. Depending on the size of the block you're making, you line this square up with the square you have, and you use the ruler to trim. It's super easy. You start out with this untrimmed block, and you get this beautiful square block that is trimmed. So, and this ruler will do 6 different sizes, from 4-inch finished all the way down to 1.5-inch finished. So it's a handy little tool. So if you are going to use this ruler, you want to make sure that you follow the cutting on the ruler. And I actually just had some little scrap paper at home, and I just took a moment and wrote down little notes for my cutting, because I thought if I try to cut right from off the pattern, I'm not going to be able to translate it in my brain to the ruler. So I did make little notes, and if you want my notes, I could just send me an email, and I'll make a little photocopy of my notes and email it to you. I might even get ambitious and type it up nice and neatly for you. So just let me know if you want my notes, and I'll get them off to you either in rough format like I used them, or I'll type it up for you. So couple more tips and pointers just for pressing. So we know I made the choice because on the Hourglass, we're using the technique where we are nesting 2 half square triangles. I did press to one side because if I press open, I have no way to nest and I'm not going to be able to get a nice sharp meeting in the center. So I just pressed to the one side. And then on the Hourglass itself, once I had cut it apart, I did press open. So you can see I'm pressed to one side, pressed to one side, and pressed open. And that gives me a nice flat little piece with no bumps. And the cat's cradle kind of does its own thing. You can follow if you're cutting as per the pattern, just follow its pressing, it's very good. And if you're cutting with the ruler, take a moment, watch the video. This ruler, you can either go to Creative Grids USA or you can use your phone and scan this QR code that is on the ruler and it will take you right to its video. And you can watch how they press it and that right in the video. So once I put the blocks together, I did press away from my hourglasses. So I pressed towards my cat's cradle unit and towards my center block, and was able to nest when I sewed my rows together. And this one, it just naturally pressed away from the center. After I had the rows sewed, I pressed up and down from the center. And the block lays just beautifully flat, doesn't have any big bumps or anything in it. So I always like my block to be as flat and smooth as possible because I do usually use a long arm quilter, and it's just easier on the long arm quilter if there are no big knots of fabric that they have to try to sew over. So that is month 3, making 8 blocks. Of course, if you have additional questions, if you're sewing and you're not sure what you're doing or how to do it, are you doing it right, you can call me. You can come in, we can Zoom or FaceTime or meet in person. Just want to keep you moving ahead on your blocks because this is going to be a really pretty quilt. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in month 4.